Yes, it is. Right. I'm going to just put this in the Facebook group. Be a big one today. I feel like I say that every day. I'm going to stop saying that. Throw you guys in. You can handle it. All right. We are, let me see if I just want to pull this up this way. Okay. Where are we? There we go. Okay. Just shut this one down so I can see. Okay, so let's kick this one off. My hair is like way too big today. I'm just gonna pull up the chat just because I love it when you guys talk to me. I hate talking to a screen. It's so annoying. And I'm gonna pull up this so that I can let everybody in if they come in late. All right, so before we dive in, how's everybody feeling? Well, I feel like Megan's busy right now. Ash, how are you feeling? Good?
Yeah, good. I'm loving it. Last night, I swear you came to me in my dreams and we had like this deep conversation. Yeah, it's really weird.
Shut the fuck up. What? Oh, we don't have to talk about this now.
Yeah, just about
how
like
fucking cool is that?
Yeah, like the codes are like coming in and like, yeah, it was really, really like, again, I fell asleep to you. So maybe that's why.
Oh my God, we have to talk about this offline. This is so
Yeah.
cool. So I'm like, I love this stuff. That's amazing. I'm so glad.
Yeah, this is like a game changer. It's awesome. Yeah.
Oh my God, you're so sweet. Yes. Okay, good. Well, today, hopefully will not disappoint. The rest have been good. I don't want you diving in and being like, this was a shitty code, Lindsay. What were you thinking? Okay, so I'm just gonna dive in. I'm gonna pull up my notes. I'm gonna dive in and get started. So just to kind of recap, because I always love a good recap. So our very first code was belief. Obviously, it's important that you have the belief that this is possible, have the belief in yourself. If you don't, then, I mean, it's none of this is going to be possible for you. And then of course, the second one was embodiment. Like now that you have the belief, it's like, who do we need to become in order to stay consistent in creating this healthy lifestyle, in order to be able to achieve our health goals and maintain them beyond? Who do we need to become every single day? What does that woman look like? How does she think? How does she show up in the world? And then yesterday was a really, really big one. We talked about radical responsibility. And radical responsibility to me was something that totally changed my life, because I started to realize that the more I took, like, I feel like oftentimes there's this like big resistance with it, you know, in terms of like, it's really, when I, like Marcus and I always joke, like, I would much rather stay pissed at him than like be like, you know what, I actually was really having a bad day. Like, nobody wants to fucking do that. I would so much rather stay pissed at him. But I find that the more I can take that radical responsibility for myself, the more empowered I feel. And truthfully, the faster I move. The faster I move in my life with my goals, the faster my relationships expand, like the deeper they get, like everything just moves so much faster because I'm in charge. I'm taking the lead. And then I think as a result too, I think a lot of people around me in my life, we're going to talk about this a lot today too. It's like, and we talk about this a lot in the Nourish system, like being a woman that is self-led is essential in order to be somebody that can lead others. And so like, I always think about that in terms of my family, even in terms of my friendships, in terms of my community. In order for my girls to become strong leaders. And believe you, Maddie's the bossiest bitch like in the world. Like she's going to be like the strongest leader of all. Her teacher always says she's going to be a really strong leader. And I'm like, I'm there for it. It's hard to parent, but I'm there for it. But in order for us to be able to lead others, we have to be able to lead ourselves. And so I think that by taking radical responsibility, it really shows true leadership, because you are not afraid to go first. You're not afraid to say, I'm sorry first. You're not afraid to say, like, I messed up, like, this is on me, or what, like, you're not afraid. And so then that gives people, you're basically helping other women, other people around you. You're signing their permission slips in order for them to do the same. So today's code is a good one. I picked this as the fourth code because it's something that we all suck at. And the fourth code, we also talk about this in the nervous system, but I'm going to dive into this a bit deeper today. But the fourth code is boundaries. And the reason why I picked this code is because whenever women tell me that they don't have time, whenever women tell me that they can't stay on track, whenever, there's some kind of like, yeah, I just can't make this happen, my immediate thought is, this isn't a consistency issue. This isn't a food issue. This is 9 times out of 10, this is a boundary issue. Because not having healthy boundaries in place is what makes us feel like we're sort of like floating, like we're not stable. Because basically we're handing over, again, it's all about that power piece. We're handing over our power to so many different people. And so before I even dive into this, I'm just going to throw out a couple questions just for you guys to check in and see if any of this resonates. If it does, then amazing. If it doesn't, then maybe you don't even want to be in this class. So, do you ever say yes to requests, even though, and you can throw this up in the chat if you want, do you ever say yes to things even though your gut is saying no? So in your heart, you're just like, oh my God, I do not want to do this, but you just say yes anyways out of obligation. Okay. Do you inconvenience yourself for other people? So do you go and make your day even harder just to make somebody, okay. If you have let's say you get into a fight with your best friend or a sibling. If you have an issue with something that they've said, if they said something to hurt you, if you have an issue with something that they're doing, do you sidestep having a hard conversation and instead just kind of casually ignore them? You kind of just start ghosting. So it's I don't really like you. I don't really want to be around you. I'm just going to be really busy for a while instead of having this really hard conversation. Do you engage in passive aggressive expressions of anger? I feel like a lot of people are going to be like, yes, I'm totally, my mom is this, instead of calmly expressing your feelings. This is a big one, I think. Shout out to the majority of the women that I know right now who are sitting in this call. Are you self-sufficient and you do everything for yourself by yourself? I don't need anybody's help. I've totally got this. Do you prioritize other people's needs or desires above your own? Do you often feel like you should be doing more in all of the areas of your life? I should be a better mom. I should be, more dedicated to my job. I should focus on my health more. Are you overly invested in the people in your life? So whatever their decisions are, their feelings, their outcomes, can it totally control your whole day? If your husband is having a really stressful time at work, does that come on you? Do you start to carry that on your shoulders? And are you so resistant for help that you end up doing most things by yourself? Okay. Because these are often things that I find with women, when it comes to boundaries, these are the biggest areas that we struggle with. And the reason why boundaries are so important is because boundaries are a huge part of establishing our identity. And so when we think back to the second code of embodiment, this is key. They're also a crucial aspect of maintaining our mental health and just like overall like feeling amazing. Because if we don't have them, like look at all of those things, like you're just going to be left exhausted, resentful, bitter, like, and so it's a huge part. And I think that when we have weak boundaries, like I said before, it can kind of make you feel like you're floating, because your feelings are so based on, it's that people pleasing aspect. I want to make sure that so and so's happy, like, not mad at me. I want to make sure that like everybody thinks I'm, great. Like it's like all of that validation piece. And depending, I think, on each of us and at different areas in our life, we may have, and obviously like there's so many different schools of thought to this, but you can have rigid or loose boundaries or somewhere in between. And I think that when we lack strong, well, we don't necessarily want strong boundaries. The idea is that we want those in between boundaries. So when we lack healthy boundaries, I think it's really an indication that we don't have a strong identity of who we are and like what we want and what we're willing to tolerate. Either that, or oftentimes I find like it's an enmeshment with something else. Like this was a huge thing that I struggled with my mom. Like we were totally enmeshed, and like, so I had no boundaries with her. Probably why our relationship got so freaking toxic. And so I think this code is important because it's so important for you to know that you have a right to say no without feeling guilty. You have a right to change your mind. You have a right to space. You have a right to advocate for your needs, for your preferences, for your desires, to vocalize your opinions, to express your feelings. And you have a right to still be treated with respect and love and consideration in all of those moments. You have a right to really live your life on your terms and set yourself up to be able to do it with people who have earned the right to be in your space, which is often hard because, in many of these situations, in many of these friendships, which is why this conversation is like so important to me. In many of these situations and in many of these friendships, they were started at such a young age that it's just like these patterns. We've developed these patterns with people. And so based on that, they have grown and expected certain things from us. So all of a sudden, when you embark on a period of growth in your life, whether it be weight loss, well, I think it's all really the same thing. Weight loss, personal development, like when you are growing, when you are changing, it is literally going to scare the fuck out of everybody around you, which is why it's so scary for us to do it. Because in many occasions, in many instances, you will lose friendships. You will have relationships that, have been with you forever that no longer are in alignment with what you are looking for in your life. You are no longer in alignment with certain values of other people that you used to be with, like in alignment with. And this topic hits so close to home for me because when I was trying to lose weight, my boundaries, and this was always the thing that held me back, my boundaries were always tested by everybody around me, even my mom and the closest people to you, my mom, my dad, my sisters, my best friends, my boyfriends, my extended family. Every single opportunity that I was with them, it was like they were testing me. But that's why, because I grew up a chubby little kid. I was always overweight. That was supposed to be my destiny. That was the vision of myself that everybody had. And so all of a sudden, when I'm changing that, not only is it uncomfortable for people because they're like, oh, well, Lindsay's like growing and changing. Like, what does this mean? What does this mean for our relationship? What does this mean about like how we're going to connect? Like, is she going to leave me behind? Like, there's that whole abandonment piece. Not only that, but you are a freaking mirror to what they are doing in their own lives. You are a direct reflection of all of the things that maybe they haven't been able to do, that they struggle with. And so when it came to things like, I'll never forget, like when it came to things like friendships, I had to leave behind an entire group, like 20 really good, phenomenal friends, because they were like my fun party group, I guess you could say. Like we would always go on like big trips together. We would drink, we would, it was like eating stupid food all the time. And I was just like, I can't. Not because I couldn't physically do it like in my diet. I didn't want to anymore. I saw how much I was numbing in those situations. I saw how much I didn't feel good in them. And I was just like, this is just isn't in alignment. I love you guys, like wish you like nothing but the best, but I just can't. Because every single time I would go out with them, if I didn't want to get like wasted, if I didn't want to stuff my face, it was always, again, testing of the boundaries. Oh, Lindsay's on her diet again. Lindsay's doing this whole like, life-changing thing, like guilt and shame around the clock. Same thing with my family. Like I can remember, I speak about this a lot in the Nourish system, but I can remember going to family functions. We'll never forget. On my dad's side of the family, it was the worst because they were all overweight. And so like, I remember like my cousins, my aunts and everything, like they used to talk shit about me. They used to say like, I was like anorexic, that I had an eating disorder, that I thought I was too good for them. Like all of these insane things. They created this like huge story about me that like was not true. Like all the way from the food down to like, I thought I was better than them. Like I didn't, like they're my freaking family. On my mom's side of the family, like the skinny side of the family, I remember going to family functions and my grandma trying to shove food down my throat and being like, you're so thin now, you look so unhealthy. And I was like, you had nothing to say to me when I was 80 pounds overweight. But that's because that's who I was. That's who she knew me as. My entire life growing up, I was overweight. And so all of a sudden I'm not. And it's like, what's wrong? Nobody ever questioned why I had gained all that weight. Nobody had ever thought that that might be an issue for me because that's who I was. And it was the same thing with partners. At the time, I can remember, like, I was dating. I'm trying to just remember who I was dating. I think I was dating like, I was dating like a couple guys at the time. And I can remember it was like one of those things where, you start to get into like a comfortable relationship with somebody and they're like, oh, like, let's order in, let's binge out on, you guys know, you gain the love weight. Like within like the first couple months of your relationship, you're going out for dinner, you're having drinks, you're staying in, you're doing all the things, and you gain the love weight. And all of a sudden I didn't want to gain the love weight. Like I was like, I don't want to do this. I really want to tighten the reins. There's got to be something else that we can do besides going out for dinner or stuffing our faces or staying home. Like, and so like my partners hated that. That didn't jive with a lot of people. And it was especially hard because this whole time I was trying to build up this new identity. I was trying to hold this new standard for myself, and other people hadn't caught up yet. And so they were constantly treating me and looking at me like I was somebody else that I wasn't trying to be anymore. And so in that regard, it's hard for me. I don't like, again, radical responsibility. It's hard for me to blame them for that because I can only imagine how scary it is. It's very scary when you're in a relationship with somebody and then all of a sudden they're not the person that you grew up with. They're not the person that you used to maybe have, like, like with my girlfriends, like we used to go over to each other's houses and drink copious amounts of wine and like order pizza and do all of that stuff. And like, I'm not that girl anymore. I will absolutely still drink wine and eat pizza. I just won't stuff my face. I don't want to feel crappy the next day. And so in a lot of situations, it's really a call for them to rise with you or get left behind. because the dynamic of your relationship will change. Thankfully, in my life, I have a core group of women around me who continue to rise as well. We are no longer, our relationship is not rooted in what we were in high school. It's rooted in who we're becoming. And so I truly believe that that's why out of all of my different friendships, this core group of us have lasted, because they've also, maybe because of me, I don't know, but they've also risen. They've also grown. They've also challenged themselves. Hell, one of my best friends went through the nurse system and lost 35 pounds. And so I think the irony is that, like most things, not to like put blame on anything, but I think that the weak boundaries that we do have, if we do tend to have them, they stem from our childhood. Because in many cases, we weren't allowed to express our emotions fully. We weren't allowed to ask for what we needed. You know, it's like all of those times, and as a parent, I feel so guilty because I've done it so many times before, where like Maddie's losing her like crap, and I'm like, stop crying. Everything's fine. Stop crying. You don't need to cry. Or if like Sienna's like overreacting about something, I'm like, sweetie, this is like stupid. Stop overreacting. Like, I'm not honoring how she feels. Maddie is upset for some reason, and I'm teaching her not to trust her emotions. I'm not sitting there being like, what's going on? Why are you so upset? What's happening? I'm like, stop crying. This is really uncomfortable for me. Stop doing that. And like most of us, that happened in our childhoods. And I think that because we weren't allowed to express our emotions fully or ask for what we needed, it's carried now on into adulthood. Except the challenge is that in this life, it can be a hell of a lot more damaging. And I think the other thing that also weak boundaries stem from, if we do have them, is this sort of like codependency that we tend to have, this need to people please. It's so important that we receive validation from others. We base oftentimes our happiness on, I mean, like this is like, so like my story, like half of my life was based on me working my ass off to try to make my parents so proud of me. Little did I know it was like an endless expedition. Like it was never, to this day, no matter what I do, it never feels like it's good. And I never feel like badass around them. And so I get, again, that's something that I have to take responsibility for. And that was part of the reason why I people pleased so much, was because I just wanted them to accept me. I wanted my friends to accept me. I wanted my parents to accept me. I wanted everybody, instead of just knowing that I am awesome. I'm awesome. And whoever gets to ride this life with me is lucky. Just like whoever gets to ride this life with you is really lucky. I think the other thing, particularly when it comes to women, which is just like, it's so sad. This like, it hurts my heart just because I also have daughters, and I'm like, I wonder how this is going to transition in the next couple of generations. But as women, we've also been socialized to play really small. We've been taught not to take up a lot of space. In fact, when we are emotional, when we do show how we feel, when we do have feelings, we're called emotional. Oh, she's so emotional. Oh, she's just being oversensitive. Like it just drives me crazy. Like, it's just like, sometimes they even call us irrational. Like I remember, oh my God, I will never forget. Back when I was in corporate, I was like pissed about, we had like a client meeting. I can't remember what the hell happened, but it was like horrible. And I remember one of the other executives on my team looked at me and was like, is it Shark Week? And I almost lost my mind, because I was like, why is it bad? It's not bad for me to feel emotional about this. My emotions are making you uncomfortable. Like, you need to check yourself. Why is it that like I'm getting frustrated and this is bothering you? And why is my frustration based on Shark Week? Like, and I think so when we think about the path, like what does it take to cultivate boundaries? What does it take to be able to hold this space for ourselves, to honor what it is that we need, to show up for ourselves? I think the road is always led with compassion all the time, because it allows us to write our own permission slip, to feel the way that we feel, regardless of what other people think. I think the other important thing to recognize as well is that boundaries, again, in line with the third code, like I've said before, unfortunately, are completely up to us to enforce, to uphold, and to maintain. It has absolutely nothing to do with other people. This is all about us, which, let's just like throw this out there right now, is so hard. Because like I said before, it's easier to ghost a friend than to have a hard conversation. It's easier to say to your husband, like, okay, fine, fuck, we'll just have sex, when you really don't feel like it. All of these, like, it's easier to just go along with something at work just because everybody else is. It's easier. But the question is it really? Because the alternative is you're handing over your power to a lot of people over and over again, and it's bloody freaking exhausting. And so when I think about all of the times in my life that have been really hard to set boundaries, like the very first one that always comes up for me is, which was really hard, and it was only recent that I started to do this, was with clients. Because I remember when I started my business, talk about people pleasing, like I was available 24/7 all the freaking time. Like it was insane. I bent over backwards for women all the time. Which is probably why I got so burnt out. Probably why I got so burnt out. But so for me, in the Nourish system, you have access to us via like a DM system. For those of you who are in it, you already know, I don't have to explain this to you, but you have access to us. You can DM us any time of the day. I say any time of the day, but also like Brooke and I sleep. So that's also not true. But the other thing that's important to note is that I remember, I think it was this past summer, I started to get really, really, I don't know, maybe it was earlier than that. I think it was around when when the stress stuff really started to happen. I started to realize how available I was to my clients. And the other thing you need to know is, like, as a coach, one of the brilliant things that I've signed up for is that I get to have these incredible relationships with women who I absolutely love, who I hope love me in return. It doesn't matter if they do though, but I feel as though because of that, I am exposed to very deep personal things about them every day. Every day I'm exposed to their challenges. Every day I'm exposed to all of the things that they're going through, and I'm there to help and support them. It's one of the reasons why, like, I love it. I sign up for it. It is like the best thing in the world, but it can also be extremely draining. And so at the beginning, when I started my business, I was available to this all the time. And then I remember when I was going through all of my stress issues and with my hormones, I was like, I gotta lock this down and I have to enforce this. And so I decided, okay, Sundays, I'm taking the day off. I'm going to take one day off a week. I just need to like have this time for me and my family or whatever. And I can remember when I first implemented it, my clients were pissed. They were pissed. They were pissed that they couldn't get a hold of me. They were pissed that we weren't available, because all of a sudden you have this coach who's available all the time, who sets a boundary and is like, I'm going to take Sundays off. Sundays, you can't find me. And I remember it was really, really hard. I got a lot of mean messages. I cried a lot, but I was like, I got to hold this. I have to hold it. Because what I started to realize was, because of Sundays, I became happier. I gave myself some space just to like let everything go, just to be me, just to be Lindsay for a day. And I became happier. I fell in love with my clients. I stopped resenting them. I stopped feeling so burnt out. I stopped feeling like I had to be there all the time. The obligation left and the joy came back. And it's funny because I talk to Brooke about this a lot, because Brooke and I are obviously in the DMs all the time. And there are days where for whatever reason, this past Sunday, I broke my boundaries. I went into the DMs. There were clients that wanted to come into consistency codes. Links had to be sent. Questions were being asked. I was in there. But on those days, I'm okay with it. I check in with myself and I say, am I okay with this? Does this feel okay? And if it does, I'm fine. I go in. And if it doesn't, I'm like, y'all gotta wait. And the interesting component to this, though, is, which is why I say that radical responsibility is so important, is because no matter how many times I can say we aren't available on Sundays, my clients will still DM us. They still DM. And it's totally fine because they forget. They don't realize. They're off doing their own thing. They're like, oh, shoot, I have a question I got to ask for this, or like, this is on my heart. I really just want to share this. Send it off to me. That's not their fault. It's up to me to withhold the boundary. So if I was getting messages on Sunday and I was getting pissed and being like, these clients don't respect my boundaries, I'm putting this boundary, they don't respect me, blah, blah. That's not the vibe. The vibe is these clients are going to do whatever they're going to do because I'm not top of mind. My schedule, my life isn't, they're not like, oh, it is Sunday. Lindsay's, they've got their own stuff going on. They're going to forget. So it's up to me to stay out of the DMs. It's up to me to hold that boundary and to say, I'll check in with you guys on Monday. And I can promise you now, not a single client says anything. Nobody complains. Nobody's upset that they can't get a hold of me on Sunday. You know why? Because I'm helping them write their own permission slips about setting boundaries. I am showing them what it feels like to set a boundary. And the interesting thing, and I'm going to talk about this later, is how somebody responds to you setting boundaries says a lot about how they respond, how they are in relationship with boundaries. And the same thing happens with my friendships. Like, I went away, it was one of my best friend, Bridget. So there's three of us, we all turn 40 within like weeks of each other. We're all Pisces. Very cute, I think. But anyway, so we went away for Bridget's 40th this year. I'm the only gluten-free and dairy-free person in the joint. A lot of cooking and everything is like going on. I get a lot of like, and because some of the girls that are up there, I don't really know that well. And they're like, oh, come on, Lindsay, just have a piece. It doesn't freaking matter. It's going to be fine. And I'm like, no, I'm going to set the boundary. I brought up gluten-free and dairy-free food for myself. It's not because to me, this is something that makes me feel really good. And so regardless of what you think about food or your diet or how you interact with like stuff like that is up to you. My boundary is I'm going to withhold this. I'm not going to have the eggs Benny or whatever the hell we ate. Like, I'm not going to do that because I know it's going to make me feel like crap. And I had to hold the boundary. Is it easier sometimes to just go along with it and be like, yeah, sure, fine, whatever. Okay, I'll have some ice cream. Of course it is. But I also know that I'm either going to be on the toilet or I'm going to feel like crap the next day. Immediate headache. Like, I do not want that in my life. So I have to hold it. Same thing with Marcus. Like, there are certain aspects of the way that we treat each other because of the way that we are grown up that simply do not fly with me. There are certain things that like he will say or certain habits that he has, like he has I swear, but like my husband is, and you guys know, he's like, as hell. He's the loudest human in the world. And so like a lot of times I'm just like, can we just tone it down with the like the swearing around the babies, because he can't compartmentalize. He just really struggles with it. And so he couldn't, like, he just kept on doing it. And I just asked, and then finally I was like, this is a non-negotiable in this household. Boundary set. No more swearing. Can't do it. We had to sit down in front of our therapist and have this conversation because I was like, I need to really set, this needs to be like set. I'm cool if you want to swear when it's me and you, when you're on your coaching calls, when you're talking to your friends. I do not want my 4-year-old to go to school and say the F word right now. It's just not the vibe. If it happens, okay, fine, whatever. But like, I don't want it to be part of her vocabulary at 4. Really hard conversation to have. Had to call in my therapist because I knew, again, Marcus struggles with boundaries because his are weak. And so when I set them, it's a thing, which is why it's really hard for me to set them. But here's the important thing that I want you to remember. Like I said before, upholding them feels really, really hard. Not upholding them feels so much worse. And so this is when it's like, it comes to the place where we have to start to do the work. And I think that why a lot of us have such porous boundaries is because a lot of times that work has to happen over and over and over again, particularly with family. I find family is the worst. You can set a boundary, you can make a request as many times as you want, and sometimes they're just not. And that's the thing, there are people who are just boundary breakers out there. And so it becomes really exhausting. But when you do it, when you set them, when you enforce them, and when you start to see how much better you feel because of them, you're going to keep it up. And like I said before, it gives other people permission around you to set them as well. Because particularly, I think when it comes to health, it says a lot about other people. Whenever we're trying to lose weight, and I find too, like the challenges, especially in relationships, is because we've been with somebody for so long, we may have both had habits and behaviors that have started in that relationship that are no longer in alignment. And so changing them feels really hard. And if you don't have somebody that's in alignment with you, that's supportive of you, that like wants to do the same things, plus on top of that, you got to throw in kids in the mix who are always just going to be like, I mean, talk about boundaries with food. Kids are like, I'm not eating that. Like, so when you have that happen, it is really, really hard. Which is why I always say, like, if women struggle to be consistent, it's because they have such a hard time holding that line of this is the lifestyle that I want to maintain. I know it doesn't line up with yours, but this is the lifestyle that I want to maintain. Because you have to, every single day, you're coming up against that wall. And so, like I said before, how others then respond to your boundaries that you set says a lot about how they hold their boundaries. Reversely, it's also really important to ask yourself, when somebody sets a boundary with you, how do you respond? When someone says no to you, what's your reaction? Do you get pissed? Do you fight them on it? Do you try to negotiate it? Like, or do you honor it? Like, I think it's really important to start to explore what we are also then reflecting out into the world. Because whether you're on the setting end of it or the receiving end of it, poor boundaries always, 9 times out of 10, like I'm going to say it, they always lead to resentment, anger, stress, frustration, feeling like you're burdened, wasted time, relationship issues. But when they're clear and you enforce them, a lot of that goes away. And so I want to just quickly go through, I just really want to be cognizant of the time. I'm going to really go through kind of like the difference between what a rigid boundary is, what a porous boundary is, and then I think what healthy boundaries are. A lot of the stuff that I'm going to talk about is based off a couple of books. So I'll link them in underneath this call afterwards, because I think that this is really important for women. These books that I'm going to reference are ones that I always go back to. I'm always doing the work on boundaries because it is so hard. But so a lot of this is based on some of the teachings from the books that I'm going to reference. So in terms of rigid boundaries, so this is when you're like super, super tight. So you don't ask for help when you need it. You avoid close relationships to minimize rejection. Intimacy is a really big problem for you. You are typically perceived by others as detached or kind of cold sometimes, maybe bitchy. I hate that word. You tend to isolate yourself a lot. That's usually when you have rigid boundaries. That's like, I find with, like, I remember when I started dating Marcus, and he did like, he always goes through these phases of like cuts, and like he calls them cuts, where he like loses weight. And during a cut, we didn't go anywhere. He didn't see friends. He didn't hang out with anybody. We never went out for dinner. It was like horrible. Finally, we had to have a conversation where I was like, your diet is not going to be dictating our life. It's just my vibe. And so, but that he has rigid boundaries, like in that aspect of his life. He has very, very rigid boundaries. Porous boundaries tend to look like you tend to overshare personal information. You say yes when you don't want to. You find yourself taking on other people's shit and like worrying about them. You put up with disrespectful or abusive behavior. So if somebody is like, I don't know, I'm not even gonna go into example. I feel like you guys don't need an example, you know that one. So what do healthy boundaries look like? Healthy boundaries are you value your own thoughts and opinions. You feel comfortable asking for help and accepting it. You know when to share personal information and with whom. And you can accept and respect the boundaries that other people are putting in place. So when somebody says no to you, it's no, and you're cool with it. It doesn't have to feel good. It doesn't have to feel comfortable, but you're cool with it. And so, like I said before, you can have different boundaries, obviously, in different situations. Like oftentimes I find like at work, my boundaries are getting really good right now, like with the business. I still struggle with it because like I talked about yesterday, I'm a recovering workaholic. And so I love what I do, but I'm getting really, really good at putting boundaries up around the business. I still struggle with Marcus. Always struggle with boundaries with Marcus. He's my partner. It's really hard to say no to him. It's really hard to throw, like, it's really hard. Girlfriends, not even a problem anymore, but it's because I've got my tribe. I have my tribe knows, and I don't even question it. Like I'm in a place right now which I really, really love with my friendships, where if they're like, hey, we're all going out for dinner, do you want to come? If I actually don't feel like going, I'm like, nah, B, I'm going to stay at home in my track pants and watch Netflix tonight. You guys have fun. Like I don't even make excuses for myself anymore. I straight up say the truth. Not interested, not my night. See you guys later. All the best. And so, like I said, different areas of your life can have different boundaries. And so I think the important thing to ask then is, so like, what does healthy boundaries look like? Because they are going to be different for everybody in every situation. And I think the other interesting component that we also have to explore, which is like a whole other different conversation, is now with the onset of social media, particularly with us working from home, like boundaries with screens and technology is also now becoming a whole new thing that we have to combat, because these little devices are actually made to be addictive. And so not only are we having to set boundaries with people, we have to set boundaries with technology, which I also just think is like so interesting. So the first step in knowing whether or not you have unhealthy boundaries, I think, is really paying attention to when something feels off. And I got to tell you this because I think it's just important to say, and I suffer from this all the time. I don't think that women trust our instincts enough. I can't tell you how many times in my life I've had a spidey sense in my gut and I've talked myself out of it. And so I just really, really want to remind you that these feelings that you're feeling are there for a reason. Your body is your compass. Like it tells you everything. And so if something doesn't feel right, if something doesn't feel aligned, tap into that, because that's your first key. The next thing I think is important to do is to really get clear on what it is that's been broken, like in terms of the boundary. What do you need to set? And the frustrating thing is that the clearer the boundary, the better. Like you can't exactly, I don't want to say you can't, that's not fair. It's not helpful to say to somebody, you can't talk to me that way. What is helpful to say is, I'm going to make a small request that either we not talk about this issue, you not use those words with me, or this topic is off, like whatever it is. You have to get very, very specific, because then that helps other people, if they're open to it, obviously, be better at enforcing those things. And so I'm just going to quickly dive in here for a second. And so I think the other thing is it's important to understand that people are always going to try to break them. They're always going to try to break them. And so again, the clearer we are, the better it can, or the more helpful it can be in helping them understand that. But show, again, which is why I said the path to having healthy boundaries and all of this is compassion, is because it's important to understand that depending on why the boundary is being set, depending on where you are in relationship to this other person, there's a lot that's coming up for them. There could be a lot of fear. There could be a lot of uncertainty. And so it's not necessarily that they're doing it to be vindictive or mean or because they don't love you. They could just be going through a lot. And so that's why I think whether it be, at work or personal, like with family or whatever, it's important to kind of do the work beforehand within yourself to just sort of know, to set yourself up for like, this may not go over well. This may not be an easy conversation. But when you come in it with, and I truly believe that this is the case with everything, whenever you come into a situation with love and compassion, and you can put yourself in somebody else's shoes, it's almost impossible for it to like go completely south. Hard things, difficult conversations are hard. Things may be said that certain people regret. But again, radical responsibility. When we approach everything with love and compassion, it just makes it so much easier. So I think I just want to quickly go through the homework. When we're checking into what feels okay and what's not okay, that's really our starting point. The next thing that I think is important to do is to really outline, and this comes back to sort of everything, as you guys can see, there's like sort of this like pattern. Really check into how you want to feel. How is it that you want to feel in relationship to this person? How do you want even your arguments to go? How do you want to feel in these situations? And what needs to be changed either on your end or the other person's end in order for you to feel that way? Because the interesting thing is too, is a lot of times, like I find that with Marcus and I in our miscommunications or our arguments, when you have radical responsibility, a lot of times it comes back to like, oh man, I got to do the work on this one. He will say something and I may not have liked what he said, but it's the fact that I'm getting triggered by it. He didn't mean it to trigger me. It just triggered me. So I got to do the work around that one. And then I think most importantly, Terry Cole talks about this beautifully in her book, Boundary Boss. She gives you actually all of these scripts, which are amazing. So I highly recommend you get it. But one of the things that she says is a great opener, which I always like to use, is, can I make a simple request? Again, it softens everything. Can I make a simple request that, if we're getting into an argument, that we can remove these words from our vocabulary, try to keep our, maybe we're like keeping our voices at a certain level. Can I make a simple request? Like, can we hold hands during hard conversations? Because I think it's going to help us to stay more connected. Because in our arguments, I tend to feel really disconnected and isolated from it. Like whatever it is, that kind of softens it and it opens the door for everything. Okay, so here is your homework. I want you to really start to explore, based on the discussions that we've had today, where do you feel like you are in terms of having rigid, porous, or healthy boundaries? I want you to sort of tally up like the areas in your life and really ask yourself, like, am I strong at work? Am I strong in my marriage? Am I strong with the kids? Like really start to figure out, almost rate yourself, like, where are you at and where do you need to do the work? The next thing is, within those situations, it's important to identify how you feel. How do you feel in relationship with your best friend? How do you feel in relationship with your mother-in-law? Like, how do you feel in these situations? And then how do you want to feel? What needs to happen in order for you to feel that way? Do you need to have a hard conversation? Like, what is it that needs to be said? How would you like them to treat you? Again, getting clear on the ask is going to be super important. And then, of course, the last thing, which I will always say, just because I think it's important to set realistic expectations, is expect pushback. Expect it. Boundaries are really hard, which is why so few of us enforce them. But I think the more that you can practice them in small ways, the better. Like, one of the things that I will always say is like such a great starting point, because we want to be able to sort of capture the small wins and like really show ourselves that it's okay, that this is safe, that like, you know, we can totally do this. And so it's really as simple as, which is going to sound so bananas, like maybe going to Starbucks and ordering a coffee, and if they spell your name wrong, correct them. If you introduce yourself and somebody's, you know, like, happens to me all the time, what's your name, Lindsay? Oh, hey, Leslie. I'm like, no, it's actually Lindsay. That's setting a small boundary. If you order something at a restaurant and they get your meal wrong, I didn't order this, can I send it back? If somebody asks how the meal was, it actually really wasn't that good. Like, really, really holding your space. Small ways to just kind of like hold your space and set it. And I think what that does over time is it really starts to strengthen that muscle for you, so that you can go on and set bigger. Like, to be able, and y'all may be very different, but to be able to have like a hard conversation with your mother-in-law right out of the gate, like, you know what I mean? To call your mother-in-law today and be like, I got to make a small request. That's not like, we really sort of want to take baby steps and do this one scenario by one scenario. And then I think over time, it's just going to help to show you, you totally got this. You can do it. And at the end of the day, even if the conversation, I will always say this to you guys, because I think it's so important for you to know. I say this in the meditations all the time too. No matter what, you are going to be okay. You are always going to be okay. So don't worry about it. With that being said, do we have any questions before we hop off? I know that this was a big one. So if y'all are like, I just need a minute to digest everything, I totally get that. All right, ladies. Okay. I will see you guys at 2 p.m. for our midday check-in. Bring your matches. I posted my recipes in our, what was it, my last one, the evening one. Y'all got my matcha and my cacao. Everybody bring your matches. We're going to have a little bit of a moment. Tonight, I may post this in the group. I am setting a boundary. I need to go to bed early. So tonight's meditation is actually going to happen. I think I'm going to make it around 7:30. I just need to check with Marcus in terms of the time and the babies. But I'm feeling, I don't know what is going on. If it's like COVID recovery, I'm really, really tired. Could just be all the screen time. I'm really, really tired. So I want to go to bed early. So I'm setting a boundary tonight. We are changing the meditation time to 7:30 if Marcus Wolf can handle the babies. So I will see you guys then. Okay. I love you all. Have a good day.